Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about small towns hidden deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Tonight, we're going deep into the hills where civilization fades and something else takes its place. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now, let's start. I was 21 when this happened. I took my mom's old car and drove 3 hours deep into the Appalachian hills to check on my uncle's place, tucked way out near a barely there town called Walden Gap. He'd passed that spring. Nobody had touched the house since. My mom asked if I'd go up and check on it before the cold set in, see if the roof was still holding, make sure it hadn't been broken into or overtaken by possums or something worse. I had some time, so I said sure. Nobody else in the family volunteered. I don't blame them. Walden Gap isn't the kind of place you pass through. It's the kind of place you have to know about to find. Not much more than a handful of houses tucked into the hills, stitched together by switchbacks and gravel. No stores, no gas stations nearby, no sheriff. Nothing but trees and steep roads. You don't get there by accident. By the time I made it to the edge of town, I'd already lost cell service. The house sat alone, right where the woods began. One story, slanted porch, paint peeling off like sunburnt skin. It looked smaller than I remembered, but I hadn't seen it since I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7. Not that I had many memories of being there. I pulled into the little dirt patch that passed for a driveway and noticed a few things right away. The mailbox was missing. Just a wooden post snapped off at the top. The screen door in the back was hanging loose, like it had been tugged too many times and just gave up. Inside, it was quiet. Still, the air felt dry and sour, like nobody had opened a window in years. There was no electricity, but the floor was solid and nothing looked vandalized. No broken windows, no signs of squatters. I walked through the place slowly, taking pictures of each room for insurance. The main room had this old recliner and a sagging couch, still covered in plastic like someone once thought that would keep it clean forever. The kitchen smelled faintly like dust and something sweet rotten, maybe spoiled spice jars or old pantry crumbs. I opened a few cabinets, empty. Fridge was unplugged, thank God. Down the hall, I found a linen closet packed with stuff my uncle clearly never threw out. Faded photo albums, musty t-shirts from decades ago, and this ugly brown duffel bag that stank of mildew and cigarette smoke even before I unzipped it. Inside were old receipts, some torn boots, and a melted flashlight that had leaked battery acid into the fabric. I was only there, maybe 20-25 minutes when I heard the knock. Just one. It came from the front screen door, that creaky sound. Soft, but enough to freeze me where I was, halfway through opening a cabinet. There hadn't been any footsteps. No car pulling in. No crunch of gravel, no snap of twigs, no warning. I looked out the window and saw a boy standing there, 17 maybe. Thin, pale, angular face. He had short black hair and heavy-looking boots. Wore camo overalls, no shirt, chest slick with sweat like he'd just run a mile through the woods. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared through the screen and said, "You got cables?" His voice was flat. No drawl, no accent, no personality at all. I told him no and stepped outside, keeping the front door cracked behind me. He said his bike broke down near the bridge, and he needed a ride to his cousin's place in the next hollow. I didn't want to leave him there. Didn't want him following me back inside either. So I offered to drive him to the bait shack I'd passed about 6 minutes back. Figured they might have a phone or a tow truck or at least someone who wasn't me. He didn't ask any more questions. Just nodded and walked straight to the passenger side door like he already knew that was the plan. I hesitated, but I unlocked it. He got in without a word. And the second he did, that smell hit me. Chemical and sour, like gasoline in moldy hay had been fermenting in a barrel. It filled the whole car. He didn't speak at first, just leaned over and started adjusting the vents. Every single one. Turning them, pointing them at himself, twisting the knobs like he was setting up for something specific. Then he asked what I was doing out there. I told him it was my family's house. He asked who else knew I was there. I said, just my mom. He looked out the window and said, "Lo, that's how they like it." I asked who he meant. He didn't answer, just kept staring out the window like we weren't even talking. A few minutes passed in this weird silence before he turned toward me again and asked if I remembered the fire pit behind the shed. I told him I didn't even know there was a shed. He gave this little grin, like I'd said something funny. "There's a tooth buried under it," he said. "You should dig it up." I didn't respond, just kept driving. About a minute later, we reached the turnoff for the bait shack. As I slowed down, he leaned forward a bit and said, "Not there." I said I needed gas anyway, and it was the only place I'd seen that looked open. He didn't argue, just said, "People there don't like outsiders." When I pulled into the lot, it was completely empty. No lights on, no truck, no sign of life at all. I pretended not to notice. Just parked and said I'd go check if anyone was around. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. Then he leaned a little closer and asked, "You really don't remember me?" I said no. He stared hard. "You stayed there before," he said. "You were a kid. You went into the crawl space and found my hideout." I told him I hadn't, that I'd never even stepped foot in the house until that day. He laughed. "Just once. Flat, joyless. I was the one under the floor," he said. Then he opened the door and got out. Didn't slam it, didn't run. Just walked behind the shack and disappeared into the trees. I locked the doors, started the engine, drove. Didn't stop until I saw the highway signs. Another 20 miles before I finally pulled into a diner that still had a flickering open sign and half a bar of signal. Called my mom, told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, calmly, I should come home and not go back. Said there were rumors about that house way back when she was in high school, before my uncle bought it. Said a kid went missing from 2 towns over, near those woods. Some people thought he ran away. Others said he was squatting in old houses. She remembered a name, the Floor Kid. Said people used to whisper about a boy who'd crawl under people's homes and spy on them while they slept. Never got caught. Sheriff gave up after 3 months. The story just faded. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about what he said. The crawl space, the fire pit, the tooth. Part of me wanted to let it go. Most of me didn't. A week later, I went back. Brought my cousin Gavin with me. Didn't tell him everything, just enough to get him to come along. We each had a shovel. Behind the shed, we found a patch of ground darker than the rest, shaped like a crescent. We dug maybe 3 feet down before we hit metal. A rusted tin box wrapped in 2 layers of plastic. Inside, a pink plastic hairbrush. A dented silver ring with a tiny heart on it. A single human tooth. And a photo. The photo showed that boy, same face, same eyes, just younger. He was sitting in a crawl space, knees tucked up, holding the camera toward himself. Behind him, something blurry. Either a hand or the edge of a face just outside the frame. We took the box to the sheriff's office in Laurel Creek. They took it seriously, said they'd run tests. We never heard anything back. 4 days later, the house burned down. Nothing left but ash and charred beams. No storm, no wires. Just gone. No cause listed. It was labeled undetermined. Now the lot's just dirt and weeds. I went back once, just drove through, didn't stop. The bait shack had a new sign nailed to the front post. Whiteboard, red paint, big block letters. Don't stop, just pass through. I kept driving. I had this overnight job at a gas station a few miles outside a town called Pinewick. Small place. 1 diner, 1 bar, a post office that closed at 4, and just enough gossip to keep everyone's noses in each other's business. Except mine. I wasn't from around there. Didn't go to school with anyone, didn't marry into any family, didn't have an uncle who used to work the mills. I was just the quiet guy who worked nights, sold gas, and restocked shelves while the rest of the world slept. The job itself? Fine. Long hours, slow nights, the occasional regular who'd make polite conversation and then disappear into the dark like I imagine most people did in Pinewick. But the commute, that was the killer. I lived an hour and a half away, out past Layton Ridge, in a town just big enough to have a Taco Bell and a tire shop that never opened on time. To get to Pinewick, I had to drive this twisting, narrow route through the mountains. One lane in places, no cell reception, no lights, no signs, and most nights, no other cars. Just my headlights, the hum of the tires on cracked asphalt, and the occasional deer darting across the road like it had a death wish. First couple nights I made the drive, I honestly thought I'd miscalculated something. Like maybe I was too tired, or maybe my car wasn't going to survive this schedule. I'd finish a shift at 6 a.m. with my eyelids doing that slow blink thing and then have to keep myself alert just long enough to not plunge off a ridge. I tried chewing gum, playing the same songs on repeat, rolling the window down even when it was freezing. None of it helped for long. Then, about 3 weeks in, I found the trailer. It was in a gravel turnout halfway between two switchbacks. One of those weird flat clearings that probably used to be part of the road before the forest swallowed it up again. Just sitting there, a plain white trailer with rust curling up from the bottom panels like ivy. There was a small window cut into the side, like a concession stand, and a dim yellow bulb above it. Behind the trailer, a generator was thumping, low and steady, more of a vibration than a noise. That first night, I didn't stop because I was curious. I stopped because I was starving, and my hands were starting to twitch on the steering wheel. I hadn't eaten my usual sad granola bar at work, and my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I pulled over, thinking I'd grab whatever they had. Maybe a prepackaged sandwich, a soda, anything to keep me awake. I didn't even get a chance to ask. The window slid open, and a man leaned out with a paper plate in his hand. No greeting, no menu, no small talk. Just handed me a plate with what looked like a meat pie on it and nodded once. I took it without thinking, like it was the most normal transaction in the world. And honestly, it was amazing. The crust was buttery and crisp, the inside packed with something hot and spiced and completely unfamiliar. Not beef, not chicken, maybe lamb. I didn't know, didn't care. I sat in my car with the engine off, chewing while the sky went from pitch black to early blue. I finished the whole thing before I even looked down. There were crumbs stuck to my shirt and a weird kind of calm in my chest, like my brain had suddenly stopped vibrating. I felt right, and I made it home without so much as a yawn. Next morning, I stopped again. Same setup, same man, same nod, same plate. Still hot, still perfect. I didn't even have to say anything. He just handed it over like I'd already ordered. After that, it became a habit. More than that, it became a part of the drive. I'd work my shift, mop the floors, count the drawer, and then look forward to that quiet 10 minutes at the trailer. Sometimes I ate in the car. Other times, I stood at the little counter, leaning against the warped wood as the man worked the grill behind him. We never talked much, but if I asked a question, he'd answer. He had this slow, almost mechanical way of speaking, like he was just pulling the answers from somewhere deep. Said the ridge behind the trailer used to have a church on it. Said the land around there had belonged to a family that disappeared during a bad winter in the 50s. Said the road used to run a different path, but something shifted after a rock slide decades ago. I never learned his name. I thought about asking once, even opened my mouth to do it, but something stopped me. It felt wrong. Like breaking some unspoken rule neither of us had laid out but both understood. He never asked for mine either. It was just a shared space, somewhere between here and nowhere. I stopped counting how many times I went. It had to be around 50. Always the same meal, same soda bottle, pulled from a red cooler that buzzed faintly. Same yellow light casting long shadows. Until one morning I pulled into the lot and everything had shifted. The trailer was still there. The generator was running, but the window was closed. The light was on, but dimmer than usual. No one in sight. I called out, waited, nothing. Tried again, louder, still nothing. That had happened before, maybe once or twice. I figured he'd stepped into the trees for a smoke or a bathroom break. I waited a little longer, the quiet stretching out in this weird, dense way. Then I caught the smell. Not smoke, not food, something acrid and sharp, like scorched oil or melted plastic. It was faint, but getting stronger. I walked up the metal stairs and grabbed the door handle. It wasn't locked. I pulled it open. The cash register was on the floor. The drawer had been yanked out, coins scattered everywhere. Some rolled into the corners. I stepped inside, heart already thudding, and looked toward the grill. And that's when I saw it. Burned into the metal surface was a handprint, black and deep, like someone had pressed their palm flat against the red-hot steel and left it there. The edges were still sizzling. I could see little curls of smoke rising from the fingertips. The smell hit me full force, like charred meat in industrial grease. I actually staggered back a step, had to put my hand on the counter to steady myself. Then I forced my way forward and turned the gas valve off. Didn't know what else to do. Didn't want the place catching fire. I backed out fast, pulled the door shut behind me, and jogged to my car. Called the sheriff's office as soon as I got in. Told the dispatcher everything. The trailer, the handprint, the register, the smell. She kept asking me to slow down, repeat myself. Said someone would come out and that I didn't need to stay. But I did. Sat there in the dark with the engine off, staring at the trailer like it might move. Kept expecting the man to step out. Bleeding maybe, but alive. He never did. I waited over half an hour. No car passed on the road. No deputy showed up. Eventually, I gave up. Drove home with my fingers clenched on the wheel, eyes wide open, nerves buzzing. I didn't sleep that day. I sat at my desk, scrolling through news sites and forums, trying every search string I could think of. Food stand fire, mountain robbery, disappearance near Layton Ridge, nothing. It was like the place had never existed. Next night, I took the same drive, heart pounding by the time I reached the turnout. It was gone. No trailer, no generator, no sign anything had ever been there. Just a flat patch of gravel and some weeds. No tire tracks, no oil spots. Nothing. I asked around Pinewick later that week. Didn't mention the details, just said, I thought I remembered a food truck out past the ridge. Most people just shook their heads. One older guy at the bar said there was a family that used to run a roadside stand up there in the 70s. Said they packed up after their boy went missing. Didn't give a name, didn't say more. I didn't press, just nodded, finished my drink, and left. I just hit that point in the drive where everything starts to feel fuzzy and a little unreal. I'd been on the road since morning, trying to get from Larchwood to my cousin's place in Calder Hill before the weekend, but I underestimated the drive, and myself. Somewhere around 8, I pulled off onto a state road, thinking I'd find a motel and maybe something hot to eat. I ended up in this place called Glaston Ridge. Never heard of it before. The town felt like it had been forgotten on the side of the mountain, a bunch of old buildings clinging to a cracked main street that probably looked exactly the same in the 50s. I found a diner. Well, more like stumbled into it. It had one of those faded signs that just said Dinar in red block letters, a parking lot big enough for maybe 6 cars, and a buzzing light that was trying really hard to stay on. Inside, it looked like every diner you've ever seen in a movie checkered floor. Vinyl booths, coffee pots that never get washed. 6 booths total, plus a counter lined with stools that looked like they hadn't spun in years. 3 men were there when I walked in. All older, all in layers of flannel, all with the same slow-turning heads as I crossed the room. The waitress, a woman in her late 40s with a tired ponytail and a notepad that had seen better days, gave me a look that wasn't exactly unfriendly, but it wasn't welcoming either. I slid into the nearest booth and ordered a grilled cheese and fries. She didn't write it down, just nodded, walked away, and came back a few minutes later with the plate like she'd known what I'd say before I said it. Nobody talked. The 3 guys at the counter sipped their coffee, stared ahead, and muttered to each other now and then, but I didn't catch any words. I kept my eyes on the plate and chewed fast. There's this feeling you get when you're somewhere you're not supposed to be, not in a dramatic way, but just wrong. Like you've entered someone else's private circle and they're all pretending not to notice. That's how it felt in there. By the time I was done eating, I knew I wouldn't be lingering. I dropped cash on the table, nodded a thank you I wasn't sure was heard, and stepped back into the night. The temperature had dropped while I was inside. I could feel it through my sleeves. The street was almost completely dark now. No cars, no voices. Even the diner's windows looked dim, like the place was already folding up behind me. Glaston Ridge didn't seem like a town that stayed up late. The sidewalk was cracked in long, jagged lines, and most of the storefronts looked like they'd been shut for good. Dusty mannequins, faded posters, crooked blinds. I walked fast, heading for the motel I'd seen on the way in. A squat two-story building with green trim and a peeling sign that just said Mountain View. It didn't look like it had a view of anything, but it was open, and that's all I needed. I'd made it maybe halfway down the block when I heard the footsteps. At first, I thought it might just be the echo of my own shoes on the pavement. It's easy to psych yourself out like that when the streets are empty, but then I slowed down, and the steps behind me slowed too. I crossed the street casually, trying not to look over my shoulder. The steps followed, just a second later. Not loud, just steady, deliberate. I finally turned my head, just enough to catch a glimpse without being obvious. Under the flicker of a dying street lamp, I saw him, taller than me by a few inches, lean in a way that looked more worn down than athletic. His beard was patchy, uneven, like it had started growing by accident, and no one told it to stop. His jacket hung loose on him, and the sleeves looked damp and torn. His jeans sagged at the knees. He looked like someone who hadn't had a full night's sleep or a real home in a while. But what stuck out most were his eyes. They weren't on me. They were everywhere else, scanning the storefronts, the street, the sky even, like he was looking for something or someone and hadn't quite locked on yet. I told myself not to panic. He hadn't said anything, hadn't come closer than a few paces behind me. It was probably fine, just another guy walking in the same direction. But then I turned into the gas station right across from the motel, pretending to be thirsty. They had a vending machine glowing under a busted awning, and I figured if nothing else, the light would be a buffer. He followed me in. Didn't stop at the edge or keep walking, just came right up next to me and stood there like we were waiting in line. That's when he asked it, "Do you know Clara?" His voice was hoarse, like someone who'd been shouting for hours or hadn't spoken at all. I shook my head. "I don't know anyone here." He didn't react, just repeated the name. Clara. Asked what street she lived on. Same tone, like he was working from a script, trying to remember his line. "I'm just passing through," I said, taking a slow step back. He stepped forward. I could see his hands now, caked in old dirt, the kind that doesn't come off after just one wash. His fingers twitched constantly, like something was crawling just under the skin. He muttered again, something about needing to see Clara, that he had to. I turned, casually but with purpose, and started walking toward the motel. He came with me, right beside me. No more space between us. He wasn't talking anymore, but I could feel him watching me now. Every time I risked a glance, his eyes were locked on my face. Blank, but intense. When we reached the motel steps, I stopped. He stopped too. Stood there like we were old friends saying goodnight. Then he said, "I just want to talk." And he told me his name. Said it once. Then again. Then a third time, stretching it out, turning it over in his mouth like he was trying to convince me it meant something. The repetition made it stick in my head. His voice had this weird rhythm to it, like he was rocking himself back and forth with every syllable. I told him I needed to sleep, that I had an early morning. He asked how old I was. It slipped out, 20. He smiled. Not in a friendly way. His lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. Then he said, "That's good enough." I froze. That was the moment it shifted. The air felt tighter, heavier. I couldn't unlock the room in front of him. Couldn't risk him knowing where I'd be for the night. Couldn't run either. The road was too open, and he was right there. I kept my voice level. Told him again I didn't want anything from him, that I was fine, that I didn't need help. He leaned closer, not touching but too close, said he could give me his number, said I could write it down. "For later," he whispered. For when you need me instead of anyone else. I said no. Turned and pulled the lobby door open hard. The room inside was empty, no clerk, just the slow, exaggerated tick of a clock over the front desk. Each second stretched too far, too loud. He stepped in behind me, didn't speak at first, just stood near the threshold. Then he said Clara's name again, but this time it was softer, faster, like he was losing control of it. His lips barely moved, but the name kept spilling out, over and over, bleeding into each repetition. I told him to leave. Tried to sound firm. He didn't blink. Then the muttering changed. He started mixing names. Clara, his, mine, and like he was blending identities, trying to merge us into one story that only made sense to him. I slammed my hand on the desk bell. The sound was piercing. He flinched hard, like it physically hurt him. His eyes darted toward the hallway. And right then, a family came out of the stairwell. Parents, two young kids, backpacks dragging behind them. They looked tired, distracted, unaware of the moment they were stepping into. The man turned to watch them. His body swayed slightly, like he was off balance now. Then he looked at me, still swaying, still muttering something I couldn't catch. Then, with no warning, he turned around and shuffled back outside. No final word, no last look. He just disappeared into the night. I didn't wait. I ran down the hall, into my room, slammed the door, and locked it twice. I pressed my back to it until my breath slowed. Then I peeked through the curtain. The street was empty again. No sign of him. No footsteps. No flicker of movement. I sat on the bed with my shoes still on, hands shaking so badly I couldn't pull out my phone for 10 minutes. Eventually, the adrenaline ran out. I laid down on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally dragged me under. That was the last time I ever saw him. The bus hissed to a stop at the end of Crestfield Lane like it always did, doors clattering open. It was the same spot every afternoon. A dead little stretch of road lined with empty buildings that hadn't seen business in years. An old post office with its windows boarded up, a corner store with a sagging awning, and the shell of what used to be a feed shop. The pavement was cracked and graying, weeds curling through the gaps. Nothing ever changed there. That's probably why the hopscotch grid stood out so much. It was bright bubblegum pink chalk, clean lines, numbers that hadn't faded from wind or rain. Just sitting there in the middle of the road like someone had drawn it minutes before. I blinked at it. Nobody played down there. The neighborhood kids usually stuck to yards and driveways. This wasn't a part of town where anyone lingered, let alone played games. But the chalk caught my eye. And honestly, I liked hopscotch. I wasn't too old for it, not really. So I dropped my backpack near the curb and started hopping. 1 foot, 2 feet, 1 foot again, back and forth. The rhythm was weirdly satisfying. I went through a couple of rounds before I saw her. She was walking toward me from the far end of the road, hands in her coat pockets, mid-20s maybe. Her hair was pulled back so tight it made her forehead shiny, and her smile was off, like it had been rehearsed in a mirror. Too many teeth, not enough warmth. She stopped just short of the hopscotch squares and tilted her head. Asked if she could have a turn. I remember freezing for a second, unsure what to say. Strangers didn't usually talk to me, and there was something about her that made my stomach clench. But I didn't want to be rude, so I nodded and handed her the rock. She crouched, tossed it into square 3, and started hopping. She moved almost too smoothly, like she'd practiced this, like it mattered. When she landed on the last square, she clapped softly, like someone finishing a performance. Then she looked back at me, eyes wide, and asked if her friends could join us. It took a second before I noticed them. 3 men had stepped out from behind the feed store. They hadn't made a sound coming up. No footsteps, no voices. They just appeared. All of them looked older, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Work boots, jeans, blank expressions. They didn't smile, didn't wave. Just stood there watching. My shoulders went tight. Everything in me said to leave. but I was raised to be polite. So I told her, sure, they could join, but I had to head home first and drop off my bag. Her smile didn't disappear, it just changed. The corners of her mouth drooped a little. Her eyes narrowed. She said she thought we were going to be friends. The way she said it made my skin crawl. I forced a smile, said I'd be back in a few minutes. Then I picked up my backpack and walked away, fast. I didn't look back until I reached the bend in the dirt road leading up to our property. That night, I tried to convince myself it wasn't that weird. Maybe they were just passing through. Maybe they were bored adults being awkward around a kid. I even laughed a little when I told myself that. But the next afternoon, there she was again. Same corner, leaning against the wall of the old gas station, like she'd been waiting all day. I stopped as soon as I stepped off the bus. She smiled when she saw me. But this time, it didn't even try to look friendly. It was too tight, too forced. She walked over and told me she'd been really upset yesterday when I didn't come back. Said I'd hurt her feelings. I didn't know what to say, so I mumbled something and stared at the ground. Then she asked if I wanted to go get ice cream with her and her friends. Behind her, sitting half hidden by a rusted-out truck, was a white van. Its sides were dented, the front bumper was loose, and the engine was already running. Inside the van, through the windshield, I saw the same three men. They didn't move, they just stared. There was only one ice cream place in town, Benny's Shack. A rickety wooden stand with a faded red awning and sticky countertops. But they gave out little toys with each cone. Tiny dinosaurs, plastic animals, spinning tops. Most kids in school had a handful of them. I didn't. We didn't have extra money for ice cream runs. So yeah, when she said it, part of me wanted to say yes. She could see it. That hesitation. She knew exactly what she was doing, but I shook my head, said I couldn't. Her expression changed so fast I flinched. She stepped closer and snapped, "You have to." The words hit me like a slap. Then, just as suddenly, she softened her voice. Said I didn't have to be scared. Said ice cream makes everything better. She reached out and put her hand on my shoulder. I stood frozen for half a second, then bolted. I shoved her arm off and ran. Hard. My backpack bounced against my spine. Boots pounded behind me. Voices shouting my name. They were fast. Faster than I expected. I veered left, past the old mill, down the alley behind Miller's Hardware, and cut through the side gate of the church. I sprinted through the gravel lot, dodging parked cars and broken machinery, then dove behind a rusted tractor. My lungs burned. I crouched low, trying not to cry. A second later, I heard footsteps again. They were close. Too close. Then her voice echoed across the lot. Light and sing-song. Let's play hide and seek. My whole body went still. She called out again, said she was going to find me, said I was really good at hiding. I clenched my fist so hard my knuckles ached. I couldn't stay there. I crawled low, keeping the tractors between me and the voices, and slipped through the side door of the community center. The stairwell inside led to the basement, an old gym that hadn't been used in years. I ran down the steps, flung open the heavy door, and ducked into the shadows beneath the bleachers. Above me, I heard the door slam open. Their footsteps hit the stairs, slow and deliberate. Her voice called out again, still sweet, still wrong. I waited until they were halfway down the stairs. Then I bolted across the gym floor and up the opposite staircase. I didn't stop moving until I burst into the front lobby. And somehow, miraculously, a group of people were just walking in. The quilting club. A few older women, 2 teenagers with armfuls of fabric, a couple guys carrying folding chairs. I pushed into the middle of the group, barely breathing. I stood between 2 people I sort of recognized from school. The glass doors were closing behind us when a hand shot between them. She shoved the doors open and stormed in. Her face was red, eyes wild. She pointed straight at me and yelled, "That's my little sister." She ran away from me. My voice caught in my throat. She reached for me again, grabbed my arm hard. One of the teenagers' tall, buzz-cut Letterman jacket stepped between us. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Do you know her?" I shook my head. Tears poured down my face. The girl next to me pulled me into her arms. The rest of the group moved in, blocking her path. Her face changed again, calculating. She glanced at the front desk, then the exit, then back at me, and she let go. She turned and walked out. Her friends were still waiting in the van. The engine was still running. But now, with so many eyes on them, they backed off. The van rolled away, down the hill, gone. The teenagers walked me all the way home. Didn't say much, just stayed close, kept me calm. When we reached the house, they told my parents everything. I'd never seen my mom look that pale. The sheriff came that night. By midnight, the word was out. People had seen that van before, different towns, always hanging around near bus stops, schools, corner stores. They got caught a few hours later just outside Bell Rock. Van full of junk. And worse, I don't really talk about it much. I was 19 when I spent a week in a little mountain town called Marlin Ridge, tucked way out in the Appalachian hills. My cousin Joel had moved there the year before. He was working brutal hours at the lumber yard, 10, sometimes 12-hour shifts that started before sunrise and ran past dark. When I called to say I wanted to visit, he said sure, but warned me he'd hardly be around. Don't come expecting entertainment, he said. So I brought my tent, some books, and a cooler full of stuff that wouldn't go bad too fast. Joel lived in a trailer at the edge of town, on a road that didn't show up on GPS and barely had a street sign. It was quiet, too quiet. The first couple days I tried to lean into it. I'd go for long walks, following gravel roads that twisted through the hills, past barns that had caved in on themselves and trucks with trees growing through the beds. There were whole stretches where I didn't see another person for hours, just birds, wind, and the occasional dog that looked like it hadn't been claimed by anyone in years. By the third night, I was stir-crazy. I needed to see a face that didn't belong to a rusty mailbox. That's when I found the diner. It sat just before the last bend out of town, tucked under a sagging billboard for chewing tobacco. The sign out front just said EATS in flickering neon. There was no music playing inside, just the soft clatter of forks and a hum from the overhead lights that never stopped buzzing. The guy who ran the place was already at the counter when I walked in. He looked like he'd been carved out of wax skin, pale and thin, eyes almost colorless, like he hadn't been in the sun for years. He asked where I was staying, and I told him I'd pitched a tent just past the ridge, where a little clearing opened up beside the tree line. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Why not stay out back? There's a field behind this place. Flat. Safe. Nobody'll bother you." Across the room, his wife turned. She'd been silent the whole time, wiping down the same part of the counter for a solid 10 minutes. When he offered the field, she froze mid-wipe and gave him a look. Not angry, just hard, sharp. She didn't say a word, but it was enough to make me hesitate. He smiled at her like they'd done this dance before and clapped me on the shoulder. "Go ahead," he said. "You'll sleep better with a roof nearby, even if it's just mine." I didn't argue. The clearing behind the diner was decent enough. The grass was packed down in spots, maybe where animals used to graze or something. I set up my tent under the one working yard light and figured that was the end of it. I went back inside afterward, and by then the regulars had rolled in. A few older guys at the corner booth were already passing around a bottle of something stronger than the coffee. They welcomed me like I was a novelty, asked me where I came from, what I was doing out here, whether I'd ever seen a real mine collapse. That sort of thing. It felt good to be part of a conversation again, even if half of what they said sounded made up. When I stumbled out into the night, it was close to midnight. The sky was clear, the stars brighter than anything I'd seen back home. The owner was locking the door when I passed him. "Sleep tight," he said. I gave a lazy wave and ducked into my tent. I hung my lantern from the hook at the center and left it off. The second I hit my sleeping bag, I was out. It didn't last long. Somewhere in the night, I woke up. No sound, no nightmare. Just a jolt like my body had decided, all on its own, that it was time to be alert. My heart was already hammering when I opened my eyes. I couldn't explain it. I sat up slowly, still wrapped in my bag, and fumbled for the lantern. The little flame flickered to life, and I waited. For a few seconds, nothing. Then far off there was the soft creak of a door, followed by a thud, then silence again. I held still. Then came footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. Each step flattened the grass a little more, one after another, heading directly toward me. I didn't call out, didn't move. They stopped just outside, right at the zipper. And then, without any pause, the zipper began to slide down. No fumbling, no hesitation, just a smooth, steady pull like whoever it was had done it 100 times before. The flap peeled back, and there he was, the diner owner. Bare chest, night trousers, slippers. His skin gleamed in the lantern light. He crouched there, half in and half out of the tent, and said in a low voice, "Heard a growl out here. Just wanted to make sure you were safe." I didn't say anything, because I hadn't heard anything at all, except him. He reached up and tapped the lantern with one finger. "You should keep that off," he said. "Helps you sleep better." His face didn't look right. His eyes were wide, and his mouth kept twitching at the corners, like he was trying to hold in a different expression entirely. It felt forced, like he was playing a part and slipping out of character. Then he let out this weird, tight sigh, turned, and walked calmly back toward the diner. I heard the screen door creak again, then close. That was it. I stayed frozen in that exact spot until the sun started to rise. First light hit the tent walls, and I was already halfway packed. I didn't even bother with breakfast. Just went inside to say goodbye, mostly out of politeness. The wife was at the stove frying eggs and humming to herself. I told her I appreciated her husband checking on me. She turned, spatula in hand, and frowned. "He's not here," she said. "He left early this morning, around 4. Drove to Rockbridge to see his brother." She said it like it was obvious, like he'd mentioned it a dozen times. I didn't ask any follow-ups. I just nodded and left. That afternoon, I hiked deeper into the woods and found a stream with a flat patch of land beside it. It was cooler down there, and the water ran clear over the rocks, seemed peaceful, until I unpacked my tent. That's when I noticed the holes. Tiny ones, sharp, clean punctures, maybe the size of a pen tip, all over the fabric. Not shredded, not gnawed, just pierced. Pierced, dozens of them, spaced unevenly, but too consistent to be natural. I told myself it had to be mice. Or maybe the fabric was old and brittle, but I didn't believe it. I left the tent standing and walked back into town to look for a new one. The hardware store didn't have any. I asked the guy behind the counter if there was another store nearby. He said the nearest camping supply was in New Haven, 40 miles north. So I bought duct tape, told myself it would do. I didn't make it back to the stream until nightfall. The trees were leaning in, branches thick with shadow, and my flashlight barely cut through the dark. When I stepped into the clearing, I stopped cold. The tent was still there, but it had been moved, repitched, perfectly. Straight lines, tight cords, even the seams tucked flat, and it was burning. A low, hungry flame had caught along one wall and was eating its way through the patched fabric. I dropped my pack and ran to the creek, filled my bottle, ran back, through water, back and forth, over and over, until the last flame hissed and died. The tent was ruined, charred black. The lantern inside had exploded glass everywhere, frame melted and curled like a dead spider. Whoever had done it had set the whole thing up again, deliberately, and lit it from the inside. I didn't call out, didn't wait. I stood still, breathing hard, scanning the trees. No movement, no sound. Just me and the scorched ground and the dark woods pressing in from every side. I grabbed what was left and walked. All night. No flashlight, just the moon. I didn't stop until I reached a different town, where the houses had real driveways and the stores stayed open past dark. I never went back to Marlin Ridge, and I've never stayed in another tent since. That summer, I got hired to work in this little mountain town called Bramble Hollow. And when I say little, I mean it had one gas pump, one general store, and 0 cell service. unless you climbed halfway up the ridge and tilted your phone just right. The whole place looked like it had stopped aging sometime in the 70s. One cracked two-lane road snaked through the middle, lined with splintered telephone poles that tilted at strange angles, like they'd gotten tired of standing straight. The general store sat right at the bend. Paint peeling off the siding, a rusted Coke machine out front that wheezed every time someone used it. That store wasn't just where you bought canned beans and smokes. It was also the post office, the gas station, and apparently the town's unofficial town hall, courthouse, and therapist's office, depending on the day. Reese, the owner, was this wiry old man who moved like someone who'd been through 5 lifetimes and still didn't trust a single one of them. He offered me a room above the store when I told him I couldn't swing rent anywhere else. Didn't even ask for much, just said, keep the noise down and don't go poking around. Fair enough. The room was small, like broom closet small. Just a narrow cot with springs that squealed every time you shifted, a beat-up dresser with a drawer that stuck halfway out and refused to close, and a window that faced the back lot, which meant it mostly looked out on dumpsters, and a patch of gravel where dogs like to fight at night. The door didn't close all the way unless you gave it a good shove, and even then it just sort of sagged into place. No lock. Just this cheap little latch that jiggled if you brushed against it too hard. Right next to mine was another room that looked identical from the outside. But that door, locked tight. Thick padlock, heavy chain. I asked Reese about it once when we were restocking shelves. He paused, wiped his hands on a rag and said, that was my brother's room. Then he walked away, didn't even pretend to be busy, just vanished into the back like the conversation had never happened. I figured maybe his brother died in there or ran off or something. Didn't seem like a line of questioning that would win me points, so I dropped it. Still, some nights, just as I was drifting off, I'd hear things. Soft taps on the wall between our rooms, not loud enough to be plumbing or anything mechanical, more like knuckles. Tap, pause, tap, tap. Always just 2 or 3, never a full rhythm, enough to make you freeze, listen, and wonder if you imagined it. The town itself moved slow. Most days were quiet, with people going about their business like they were on autopilot. They weren't unfriendly exactly, but no one went out of their way to talk to me. I'd get a nod, maybe a muttered morning, and that was it. It was like they were all part of some inside joke that I wasn't invited to. I remember walking into the diner once and having the entire place go silent, not dramatically, just naturally. Like everyone stopped mid-sentence the moment they noticed I wasn't one of them. I sat down, ate my food, left a tip, and walked out without a single person saying a word to me. There were no sirens in Bramble Hollow. No cops patrolling, no ambulances rushing anywhere. If something went wrong, it took at least an hour for help to wind its way up those narrow mountain roads. That thought always hit hardest around midnight when I was alone in that room, listening to the store creak and groan like it was trying to settle into itself. One night, it was Thursday, I think, I couldn't sleep. The air was thick, and my sheet stuck to me in patches. I just dozed off when I heard it. Loud, frantic banging on my door. Not knocking, pounding. Like someone using the side of their fist, over and over. I bolted upright. For a second I thought maybe it was Reese, maybe the store got broken into or something. But then I heard voices. Shouting. 2 men, both yelling at the same time, overlapping in a way that made it hard to pick out the words. I crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. The light from the single street lamp down in the parking lot cut across their faces. They looked panicked. One guy was tall and wide-shouldered, swaying like he couldn't find his balance. The other was hunched forward, banging again on the door with both fists. "Open up," he shouted. "Please, people are hurt." The words slurred together, thick and wet, like his mouth wasn't keeping up with his brain. The other guy barked something about a fight, said someone pulled a knife, said people were bleeding. I stood frozen, unsure what to do. My hand hovered over the latch. If they were telling the truth, I couldn't just ignore them, right? But something was off. They didn't look scared. They looked wired. Frantic, yeah, but not the kind of frantic that comes from fear. The tall one pressed his face against the glass beside the doorframe. His eyes were wide, bloodshot. His mouth kept moving. "Trouble," he mumbled. "Trouble. Trouble." Then I saw his shirt, dark splotches all down the front. At first, I thought maybe he spilled liquor on himself. They both reeked of alcohol and sweat. But then I caught the smell, sharp and metallic. Blood. I cracked the door an inch, just enough to see clearly. "Are you hurt?" I asked. The guy with the bloody shirt shook his head fast, eyes darting side to side. "No," he said. "He's stabbing everybody." He didn't explain who he was. Before I could ask, the other guy yanked him back hard by the arm. "We gotta go," he snapped. "Now." They stumbled down the stairs and into their car. The engine roared, tires spinning in the gravel as they tore out of the lot. And then it was quiet again. Just me and that loose rattling latch. No phone. No lock. And maybe a knife-wielding maniac wandering around outside. I checked the back office for the CB radio. Reese kept near the ledger. Dead. Not even static. I thought about waiting it out, barricading the door with a chair and praying. But if someone was really out there with a knife, I didn't want to sit in a room with no lock. The fire chief lived up the hill. I'd seen him around. Big guy named Everett with a permanent scowl and a porch light that never turned off. That felt like my best shot. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my sneakers, and headed outside. The second I stepped off the stairs, I regretted it. The town felt too still. The kind of stillness that presses on your ears. Every crunch of gravel under my feet sounded 10 times louder. I kept glancing over my shoulder, sure I'd see someone crouched behind the dumpsters or standing in the shadows near the tree line. Halfway up the hill, I swore I heard footsteps behind me, light and fast, like someone not quite running, but every time I stopped, it stopped too. When I reached the porch, I didn't knock, I pounded. The door flew open, and there was Everett, barefoot, shirtless, rifle in hand. He didn't even blink, just said, "What happened?" I told him everything in one long, messy breath. He grabbed the radio off the shelf and called it in. Sheriff's department said they'd send someone, but it would take over an hour. Everett didn't act surprised, just nodded and said, "You're not walking back alone." He walked me all the way down, rifle at the ready. When we got to the store, he waited for me to go in and latch the door before heading back up the hill. I didn't go back to bed. I sat on the floor, back against the bed frame, knees up, just listening. Every creak in the wood made me flinch. Every groan from the beams felt like a warning. Then, around 5, the whole room shook. Like someone shoved the building from outside. The bed bounced. The dresser scraped an inch sideways. I froze. And then I heard it. A deep, low grunt, not human. I inched to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to see. There it was. A massive black bear, leaning into the side of the building, rubbing its back against the siding like it was scratching an itch. The whole wall flexed under its weight. And in the weirdest twist, I felt relief. Terrified, yeah. But relieved it wasn't someone trying to break in. By the time the deputies showed up, the sun was up and the sky was pink with morning. They taped off the lot, questioned everyone who'd been at the bar that night. Turns out there had been a fight. A guy got kicked out, came back later with a knife, stabbed 2 people, then he disappeared. Victims survived, but no one could find the guy who did it. Here's the part that still gives me chills. One of the men who banged on my door, the one soaked in blood. He wasn't a victim. He was the attacker. They stopped at the store on purpose, to make it look like they were just bystanders caught in the chaos, to throw people off. I'd gone to stay with my cousin Nate in this tiny Appalachian town called Buckridge. It was barely on the map, just a couple of crumbling streets, one gas station with a flickering sign, and a post office that doubled as the town hall. One of those places where the road in feels like it might not be there on the way out. Nate had been living there a few months, renting this old run-down house at the very edge of town, almost in the woods. The place had been empty for a while before he moved in, belonged to an old man whose wife had died. After that, he just stopped showing up, and the house kind of gave up. Animals had moved in, You could see the damage plain as day, raccoon scat in the corners, insulation torn up like someone had been nesting in the walls. The porch groaned every time you stepped on it. The paint was curling off in long strips that fluttered in the wind. There was a back door, but it didn't really lock, just a rusted hook latch that probably could have been yanked open with a decent tug. Some of the windows were cracked. A few didn't close all the way, but Nate liked it. Said the silence helped him think. I was between things, between jobs, between places, so I figured, why not visit for a while? Get away, clear my head. The town didn't exactly roll out a welcome mat. We'd go into the little store on Main Street, Carver's General, and people would just stop, talking, moving, like someone had hit pause on a movie. Then they'd slowly resume, but different, quieter, tighter, like we'd broken some unspoken rule just by existing in their space. I tried to ask this guy once where they kept the batteries. He looked at me for a full 5 seconds before answering. Not annoyed, just like he was deciding whether I deserved to know. It wasn't just coldness. It was the way they watched, measured. Like they were trying to fit me into a category and couldn't quite decide which one I belonged in. That night, Nate and I cooked outside. He built this little fire pit out back, ringed with rocks he'd scavenged from around the property. We were just boiling beans in a dented aluminum pot and passing a bottle of cheap bourbon between us. Quiet, relaxed. But then 3 guys wandered over from the road. They didn't say hello right away. Just stood there for a moment, watching us like they'd caught us trespassing. One of them finally stepped forward, offered a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, and asked what brought us out here. We told them. Nate was renting the place, I was visiting. They asked how long we were planning to stay, asked if we had a generator, asked if we carried cash. Every question sounded normal at first, but the way they asked them, it felt off. Like there was another meaning behind every word, like they were mentally cataloging what we had, what we didn't, and how easy we'd be to handle. They kept smiling, but not together. One would smirk at something the other said low enough we couldn't hear, then snap back to a blank stare. I felt myself shift closer to the fire without meaning to. When they finally drifted off, no goodbyes, just turned and walked back toward the road. I turned to Nate, expecting him to crack a joke or roll his eyes. Instead, he said, "We're done out here. Let's go in." No hesitation. No laugh. We dumped water on the fire, packed up the food, and went inside. The house felt smaller in the dark. The inside was still half under renovation. Drywall peeled back, wires exposed, tools stacked in corners like traps. No curtains. You could see the moonlight on the floor in strips. We set up 2 cots in the front room, laid out our sleeping bags, and tried to act normal. Neither of us said what we were thinking. We didn't have to. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Then I heard the engine, low and rough, idling down the road. It would rev hard, pause, then rev again like someone was flooring it with the brake on. I sat up slowly. Nate was still out, breathing evenly. I looked toward the window. Just enough moonlight to see shadows stretch across the floor. Then the headlights swung through the trees. They weren't on the road anymore. They were on the property, right near where we'd been earlier. I saw beams of light cut through the branches, heard the engine die, then doors slammed, more than one. That's when I shook Nate awake. Didn't need to say anything. I just pointed. He was on his feet in seconds, faster than I'd ever seen him move. We crouched under the front window, peeking through the crack in the wall. There were 4 of them, same 3 guys from earlier, and a 4th. Bigger, older maybe. They had flashlights, moving like searchlights, not scanning, but hunting. One had a crowbar. Another had a wooden bat. One carried this thick coil of rope slung over his shoulder like it belonged there. They were talking, but not to each other. Just loud enough to hear snatches. Angry, frustrated. They're not here. They were just here, damn it. I saw the smoke. They circled the fire pit like wolves. One of them smashed the pot against a tree. Another kicked the rocks apart and shouted something I didn't catch. Then they built another fire. Just like that, piled dry